Hi, I'm William Ross. I'm a composer and at times a conductor, at times an orchestrator, arranger. I started conducting as a way to get a piece played. I think that's a challenge for any composer starting out. Is you compose something, you want to get it played. I think it's helpful if you're able to find somebody that will play it if you can conduct it. It just adds to the burden if you have to say, would you guys play my piece, and oh, by the way, would you learn it and conduct it? So it's a expedient kind of thing. I think the more you know how to conduct, I think it does inform and influence the way you might handle a compositional situation. So um, like so many things in life, knowledge is all connected, and when the more you fill up your toolbox with knowledge, your life toolbox with knowledge, the more that influences everything you do. So I think it's great if you have some experience on the podium. It helps you understand the, the implications of what you write on the page. It's funny because I think my challenge in so many things of what I have done in my life, um, while they happen within the context of music, they're personal challenges inside of me of how to be alive at that moment. And one of the challenges for me as a conductor is feeling that I deserve to be up on the podium, that to step up onto that podium. And what do I bring to that? What are my credentials, for lack of a better word? But I don't mean credentials in the credentialed sense, but why am I there? What can I do to justify my being there? Um, and and that's something that has evolved through my whole conducting. I was terrified the first time I ever conducted. Well, not the first time because I was with friends doing stuff, but the first time I had a paid job as a conductor and try to do it, I was terrified. And I still, depending upon the context, that's a challenge for me with how I talk to myself. So I think that may be an odd answer in it, but it's important because how I feel and how comfortable I feel with myself again influences what I'm doing and how I interact with the musicians and all that. So growing in that respect, which you know all of these answers in some way are going to come back to experience, being able to spend time on the podium. Spending time on the podium is probably the single biggest teaching experience you can have, because um, that gives you an, an experiential moment, and there's just no substitute for that. You can't learn to conduct from a book. You can learn all the things about it, but you have to be up there, and then you as a human being have to interact in that moment to learn, okay, what am I doing? How's it affecting this? How can I do it better? And that's a process that for me still goes on to this day. Preparation meets opportunity. That's a cliche, but on the podium, that's probably one of the most powerful cliches. The more prepared you are, the more comfortable you're going to be, the more the musicians are going to feel like, okay, I can trust this person. They're going to help me here, as opposed to get in my way. So, you know, I think to be prepared is probably the single biggest thing to be up there. It affects every single aspect of what you're going to do. So, preparation. Well, my approach to conducting, like my approach to everything, it's changed. It has to. Every time I step on the podium, I'm a different person from the last time I stepped on the podium because of experience. There is no way I can overestimate how important experience is. It's impossible. You can't learn to conduct until you have to conduct, to learn to conduct. You just have to. And there may be people that step up there and, they just have it, and that's wonderful. But I think the vast majority of us have to get up there. We have to do, go through the process of what we've learned, apply it, see how it works for us, make changes, interact with the musician. We learn what's working, we learn what's not, and that's a process of change that will happen, I think, to anybody who steps up onto that podium. I, you know, I there are so many master works that have been written by masterful composers that, Ravel and Stravinsky and Beethoven, depending upon where you are. Bach influenced me so greatly that I was just depressed. I realized I would never rise to even remotely close to that occasion. After the Goldberg variations, studying those, I literally was depressed. So, but I got a lot out of that. My contemporaries, there's John Williams is, to me, he's in that pantheon of names like Ravel and Stravinsky and Beethoven and John Williams. I can't overestimate the importance of experience on the podium. I can't overestimate the impact of somebody like John and his music, what it's had on me, or Ravel or Stravinsky, these people, And then in other areas, Bill Evans is, Oscar Peterson, Herbie Hancock. I mean, these people are Chick Corea. I listened over and over and over to those things. That's informed me, or it's had an effect on me. Well, the most memorable teacher to me, going again, a kind of answer that has nothing to do with music, but ultimately did, was a professor of mine at UCSB named Paul Wienpaul, who was kind of a student of Zen, and have always been fascinated with that. And he was a lightning rod for me about looking within yourself and trying to understand who you are, trying to put the world together, not by reaching out and putting the world together that way, but by trying to put it together inside of you, and then that picture reflecting outwards. I'm not saying I've been successful at it, but I love that if you're going to take a journey, I like pointing the ship in that direction, and I've been fascinated. So that's in the non-musical. In the musical area, I have to mention Alan Ferguson, who was a mentor to me and a wonderful man. He was like a father to me, and he couldn't have been more helpful to me. Trying to convince me to take things seriously, to really apply myself, the importance of hard work, how it would come back to help me in the path, and anyway, it's a very profound impact upon my life and my musical journey. The answer to that is dependent upon the time that I have, and I think that's a consideration that you have to, has to be respected. Sometimes I'll get calls to come in and conduct a last-minute session for a movie or something, or I'll get calls ahead of time, but the score isn't written till literally hours before the session. So there's been times when I step onto the podium and I'm sight reading right along with the musicians. So the challenge there is to know, okay, what do they need to sight read this? I mean, this is my perception of the challenge. What do they need to sight read this? How can I help them do what they need to do? And most of the time, that's just being really clear about, cadences, periods of the music that are going to be happening, whatever. And one of the things I like to do, this may sound very elementary, is I want to make sure that the meter changes are very big so that I can be, at least I can be helpful in that respect. It's such a basic thing. But if I can't, if the meters are just as high as the staff itself, and this music is flying by and there's lots of meter changes, it's a struggle. So that's one of the things I'll do, even if I'm sight reading. Sometimes is I'll get in and make some notes. Oh, okay, and I'm not afraid to put geometry in there. I saw some of Korngold's scores that were filled with squares and triangles, and it's just a way when you're sight reading to help okay, triangles 3, squares 4, and away we go, And if there's streamers and punches, my focus is going to, and there's no click, then I'm really focusing on keeping what I'm sight reading literally in sync with those streamers and punches. So I don't mean to tune them out purposefully, but everybody has a job to do, and at that moment I'm kind of keeping that music synced to the film, and I'm doing my best to be clear to them about what's going on. If they have passage work or something like that, and they're doing this, they're going to look up for the big seams in the music, the cadences, the transitions. All those are really important to be very clear about. But once they get going and there's a certain inertia, I try and make sure that is in keeping with the sync of the movie. And so that's when I'm kind of last minute. If I have the luxury of a concert or something that's far off, I love to know the score. And being a composer, or wanting to be a composer, I'm very interested in what the compositional aspects of the piece is. So I'll take it apart. I like to know who's doing what, where, what the textures are, the layers. And all that helps me to know how I'm going to balance the orchestra, should it need balancing. Because I'm going to be aware of what's in first position, second position, third position. And so that's a great way for me to be able to talk to the orchestra with some kind of authority. I know that I want the oboe to be heard here. That's what this is about. And so I can say, folks, this is a moment for the oboe. String, let's be as soft as possible, or whatever I need to do to. So it's very helpful to understand the compositional aspects of that. The challenge is to learn what the musicians need to be successful at performing. The musician, most of the time when I step on the podium, everybody there is a better musician on their instrument. They're just amazing musicians. So I think trying to do too much, people, how can you find a beat? Where's the beat? And you can see a lot of times when that happens. And I'm not being critical of anybody. The musicians are going to do what they need to do to get to the piece. So they kind of go, okay, we'll just play it. And they listen to each other and they perform the piece. And so they know how to get through very complicated pieces of music without a conductor. And if the conductor isn't helping them, they're going to, they're wonderful. They'll do what they need to do, and they'll make the conductor sound great. And I was always amazed with people like Boulez who just have this little precise precision thing going on. And I saw the Rite of Spring with him, and it's just electric. And it was like he just knew, okay, this is what you need to do this wonderfully. And then there's other people that are all over. So. A tip for me that was something I got in my experience was that I tend to think of the energy very often at the weight that I'm pulling through something on the way up. That especially if you have a bow and you're playing into something, to be able to feel that with the conductor, I think gives them a certain resonance with what we're in sync, as opposed to the energy on the way down, which is it's very jerky. So that's something that again, you read about these things, but to be able to become that, if that's the right way to put the words, to become what you read and to become what is appropriate for the musicians, I think that's a challenge. And as a tip for me, thinking of the being able to pull through the beats, and boy, with vocal conducting, that is such a great key to be able to depending upon what that singer is doing every night, and they can be doing differently depending on how they're breathing and how comfortable they are in the room and the song and how they feel. All of that affects them, and when you're following that, being able to have that control on each beat really makes a big difference. Well, I'll tell you one that I think is funny. I don't know. It was certainly a horror story to me at the time, but it kind of has to do with conducting. As a matter of fact, when I first got out of college and I was trying to make a living in music, I got a job as what we call a piano conductor. I don't know if people know what that is, but there were people that would go around and they would tour, and they would usually take a conductor who played piano, and then depending on who they were, they would take a bass player or a drummer, all the way up to, well, when I did Barbra Streisand, we took the entire orchestra, which was wonderful. Anyway, I was working for Mitzi Gaynor, who did a show at the time, and I was her piano conductor, and we were at the Doral Dinner Theater in Fort Lauderdale. Boy, this is taking me back years. I mean, I was literally starting out, and I remember that show started with a temporal, and as shows often did then, at least, temporal, it gets everybody's attention, and there's a temporal, and then there's an announcement, and ladies and gentlemen, the start of the show, whatever, I can't remember what it was, but there was something, and everything cued off that temporal. The moment the temp happened, the lights came down and everything. So I started the show, and this isn't abnormal. This is a very common kind of thing. So it's about a few minutes before the show, and I'm sitting there and getting ready to go, and I look at the temp, player, make sure he sees me, and like this. So we're all ready to go, and I get the cue, and what happens is the stage manager goes, "Go cue," and then they just kind of assume there's a temporal, and they everybody starts going. So I get my cue, and I look up at the temporal guy, and I go like that, and I go, "Give me the," it's out of time, so I just point to him, right? Nothing happens. And the lights are going down, and I point to him again, and nothing happens. The guy's looking at me. I'm not making this up. He just froze, a deer in the headlights. And finally, the drummer, Jerry Homan, wonderful guy, did a thing on his floor tom, and that broke the ice, and the temp guy joined in, and so we got through it. But it was crazy. So the next night, this is the story. This is the horror story. That was difficult enough. The next night, it's about a couple minutes before the show starts, and I go, I got to make sure this guy. So I walk over in front of the orchestra there, and I get his attention. I go, "Hey, John, whatever his name was, I can't remember." I go, "Hey, remember tonight when I go like that," and he hits the temporal, and the lights suddenly. I see the road manager running off. He was ready. He runs off. The light guy starts to go, and I'm like, "What is?" So anyway, it was, and Mitzi came running up. Why they couldn't just stop, and they didn't want. There was a lot of inertia. That's a word I used earlier about what happens in a piece. Well, there was inertia with this, and so anyway, I never forget that moment. When I go like this. There's just no substitute for getting up onto the podium and and learning. This is definitely something you learn as you go, and you have to allow yourself. You have to be gentle with yourself. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Take it seriously. Don't laugh off your mistakes, but really want to learn what the musicians need and what's helpful to them, really, and respect that and want to present that to them and show up prepared. That's respectful.